All right, hey everybody. Thank you for watching this Getting into Fluorescent Minerals video. Hopefully it will be informative and give you all the insights you're going to need to experience this hobby in a pleasant way. In this presentation, we're going to talk about the rocks, how to get them, how to tell them apart, UV lights, displaying your rocks, and taking photos and sharing them. But before we get into that, let's talk about why you should trust what I'm saying. First of all, my name is Nicholas Viltrakis, and I am the Vice President of the Fluorescent Mineral Society. I am also the president of the Fluorescent Mineral Society's Midwest chapter, and according to the Beach Boys classification of young American females, they make you feel all right in my area, and I can get behind that. In general, I have been a gem and mineral collector since 1980. Here you can see me doing a lick test. I'm also a professional photographer and a musician and a process engineer with Johnson & Johnson. I've also become recently a YouTuber because I have started to record and I suppose share with the rest of the world a bunch of experiments or ideas that I've got related to fluorescent minerals that might help them. So there's all kinds of stuff up there, trying out anything I can think of and just I guess sharing them with the world. So there's a link at the bottom of this, and if you have the PDF that accompanies this presentation, then you can click on that and go directly there as well. But for me in the beginning, how I got started with this whole craze was that a friend of mine during the pandemic was cleaning out his garage and said, I have this fluorescent tube light. You want it? A black light? And I said, sure, I love trash. Bring it over to my house. So I got the light. It's the kind that would light up your Led Zeppelin poster or a black light bowling or a dance club. And already being a gem and mineral collector, I went to one of my favorite areas to collect, which is eBay. And I found that there was wellamite and calcite that was quoted as fluorescent. So I bought that, and when it showed up, sure enough, that black light made the wellamite light up on this specimen. And from that moment, I was hooked. It made me realize that there was magic just outside of our perception all around us. Then, after a short time, it got out of control. Some people would say they want to be buried with their possessions. I'm more likely to be buried in my possessions. In fact, between March 2020 and October of 2023, I went from finding out that fluorescent rocks existed to being the president of the Midwest Fluorescent Mineral chapter. And 2 years after that, I became the vice president of the whole organization. So one would say that escalated quickly. But that's not why you're here today. You're not here about me. Let's talk about getting into fluorescent minerals. We can all clearly see how cool fluorescent minerals are, but figuring out what you need to get started can be daunting, costly, and seemingly complicated. In this presentation, I'll be providing insights, examples, and suggestions about the aspects of the fluorescent mineral hobby. So to begin, let's talk about the UV spectrum. This is a portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, and it shows all the way from the end of visible light all the way up to the top of ultraviolet. We can see with our eyes between 700 nanometers and 400 nanometers. But above 400 nanometers to 200 nanometers is ultraviolet light, which we can't see with our eyes, but contains powerful photons that we'll use to elicit a fluorescent response. How does that work exactly? Well, when all rocks, of course, are made up of atoms, and when this high-powered photon from the ultraviolet range in the electromagnetic spectrum hits an electron, it can push it to an outer valence level or a higher valence level where it stores some of that energy. When that atom wants to go back down to where it feels most comfortable, it has to release the energy. And since we've pumped it full of energy that is 400 to 200 nanometers, when it releases it back, it's less, and it was going to release something that is between 700 and 400, which is in the visible range that we can see with our eyes. This slide displays how the hobby distinguishes a lot of the ultraviolet spectrum. So in general, what you have is a short wave, which is UVC, and that's between 200 and 280 nanometers. The midwave, which is UVB, and between 280 and 315 nanometers. And then long wave, or UVA, which is between 315 and 400 nanometers. These are the main classifications when we say short, middle, and long wave in the fluorescent mineral hobby. But it also has been changed slightly because in the new era of LEDs, they're a very much more narrow band, and the hobby has adopted some additional wavelengths for their lights. This is going to come up later in our talk about fluorescent mineral lights and also the different effects that wavelengths have on the rocks. Here's an example of an entire rainbow of what you can find under just long wave. So each one of these is illuminated under long wave UV light, and you can see there's 2 rows. So there's more than just one of each, but you can find an entire rainbow out there in all of this fluorescence. This is why it got me excited. Well, our first chapter is how do you acquire these fluorescent minerals? Because sure, they're cool, but unless you have some, it's not that cool. Starting off, most people, especially in the mineral hobby, enjoy collecting. So these are a couple of images from Sterling Hill Mining Museum. And New Jersey claims to be the fluorescent mineral capital of the world, Franklin, New Jersey specifically. Here you can see some people collecting at a tailings pile that's up there at the mining museum. In general, there are a lot of locations around the world that are hotspots for fluorescent minerals, including all of these. Now, I've already created a presentation that shows the minerals and what they look like under UV light for each one of these locations in a previous presentation that I've created called Introduction to Fluorescent Minerals. And if you have the accompanying PDF, you can click the link to that, which is also on my YouTube influencer page. The second half of that video, so 30 minutes on, is going to be the show and tell of all of these areas. The first half is going to be an introduction to fluorescent minerals again. Okay, but practically, I live in the Cincinnati, Ohio area, and I crowdsourced the 28,000 members on the Fluorescent Minerals Facebook page to ask where can you currently go and collect. And again, because of the fact that I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and this presentation was geared towards there, these slides are going to go from as close to where I am to farther away from the Midwest as we get farther. One of the first suggestions was Ohio. So here's a lot of areas that have fluorescent sodalite, fluorite, calcite, and celestine in Ohio. I have 2 pictures of fluorite here from Ohio on the slide. One thing I'm going to note is, though, that you can see a lot of these minerals are kind of concentrated towards the Great Lakes, which is a great segue because the second suggestion that we have that's close to us is the Great Lakes. 4 of the 5 Great Lakes, according to this person who's submitted it, have fluorescent sodalite. You can also find chalcedony green, which I have pictured at the top, and various fossils with glow. Also, this user has found some yellow color with long wave and some calcite with medium wave, and on Lake Michigan, and some greens and reds with short wave. Now again, technically all 5 of the Great Lakes have fluorescent minerals, but 4 of the 5 have the fluorescent sodalite, according to this person. Traveling a little bit farther away from where we are right now in Cincinnati, Sterling Hill Mining Museum and the Franklin Mineral Museum are 2 great places that have the ability for people to come and collect. They open in April, and both sites have collecting areas that are handicap accessible and charge only an entrance fee plus price per pound, and that is amazing. There's a link at the lower left of this slide that you can choose to go to see what they have available now. There's even some night digs, which is going to help out with the fluorescent lights, of course, because they're not as powerful as the sun. And we'll talk about that a little bit later too. Now traveling even farther, the Southwest is another hotspot for fluorescent minerals. Dugway, Utah is a premier free public rock hounding location famous for rhyolite geodes featuring colorful chalcedony quartz and even some urinal salts fluorescing bright lime green under UV light. A little farther from that, Bingham, New Mexico. You can collect fluorite and cerussite, which is a lovely color combination. Another suggestion out in California was Palo Verde, where the Hauser geode beds have calcite and also chalcedony that can be collected, and they fluoresce as well. If that wasn't far enough for you, you could also take a trip to the holy grail of fluorescent minerals, and that is Greenland at the moment. The Illuminasac Complex. It's a fluorescent wonderland, and Miner Shop and Valerie Cole are taking reservations to take guided tours out there. I know a couple of people that went, and they brought back some spectacular examples of fluorescent minerals. Now, I'm not going to go that far because collecting out in the world is not really my jam, but I did crowdsource the favorite shows that our friends on the Facebook page, the 28,000 members of the Fluorescent Minerals Facebook page, go to. However, that proved not to be too fruitful for the Midwest in this presentation because of the fact that, there's 28,000 people all over the world and they have a lot of different favorites. So what I did instead was locate 2 websites that you can click on here to type in where you are currently and how far you're willing to drive, and it will give you a list of the local gem and mineral shows. So one of the things that's important when you're going to a gem and mineral show is how to find fluorescent minerals. I found a lot of the times that the minerals that fluoresce in some of the specimens are not the main minerals listed on the tag, and that can get tricky. So when we get into the education section, I'll explain where you can figure out what exactly it is that you have in your mineral specimen if it isn't listed on the main tag. But what I do here is I take my flashlights that I have and I go through all the booths and I wave my flashlights back and forth until I find something that glows. At that point, I decide whether or not I'm going to buy it, and that's how it works. I've created two videos for local rock shops which display exactly that technique. Now, each one of these has me traveling to a couple of the different local rock shops I have in my area in Cincinnati or nearby. And you can watch each one of these videos as I wave my flashlight around like a goofball and show the people essentially in their rock shops that they have some stuff that fluoresces. In one of these, I come up with a piece of galena, as a matter of fact, that has another brightly yellow fluorescing mineral on it that wasn't listed on the tag. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Another place that I really like to collect minerals is eBay. A lot of the old school purists don't really like this because it's difficult to be completely sure from the photos they have online whether you're getting the right thing or it's accurate. I do think that it's beneficial though, because a lot of the times I'll find either seminars or presentations, or I'll get jealous of pictures I see on social media of fluorescent minerals I don't have. And you can type in any search you want on eBay and see if you can find that mineral. Now, you can also do a couple of neat things with searches, save searches, which I'll talk about in a minute. But again, the main point about why eBay isn't favored by the traditionalist is because it's hard to figure out if you have a reliable seller. So I went ahead and took the guesswork out of it, and I put together a list of people that are reputable on eBay that I've purchased from. And you're pretty much guaranteed any of the people on this list, if you purchase from them, you're going to get what you are looking at. You're going to get what is a valuable rock at a good price. While you're on eBay and you want to start your collection, one of the easiest rocks to start collecting, one of the easiest locations to start collecting from, rather, is Franklin, New Jersey. New Jersey again claims to be the fluorescent mineral capital of the world, and there are a lot of very bright fluorescent minerals that come out of Franklin, New Jersey. So it's a good place to start. You can get them, they're pretty cost effective. They will glow under all of the wavelengths, and that's a really handy tool. That's a really handy place to start, rather, is due to the fact that it's very bright, it's pretty impressive, they're pretty cheap, and they glow under a lot of wavelengths, which gives you a lot of flexibility. Another very cheap place that you can get fluorescent minerals to start your collection is Long Lake Zinc Mine in Canada. Now, one caveat about this, though, is that these rocks only offer the wide range of colors under shortwave light. They don't do a lot under long wave, which is the more cheap starting point. But if you do get a collection and you want to start with the fluorescent minerals under shortwave, Long Lake Zinc is a very cost-effective way to build up your collection, and they're very pretty. Now, earlier I talked about the saved searches in eBay, and that is, I think, one of the main benefits for me. When I do find some of those things I'm jealous of or I'm looking for on the social media and I type in that search, you have the option to save it. And when you do, it can send you an email about that every morning that a listing has created some new topic that is in line with one of your saved searches. So here I have the saved search for fluorescent minerals, and that keyword came up 96 times in this particular email note. So that's a pretty fun way to stay on top of it. Then every morning you can go in and look and decide whether or not you want to spend a bunch of money on some cool rocks. Etsy's another place that you could get yourself some fluorescent minerals. I found that it's slightly more expensive than eBay, and I do not have a list of trusted sellers from this location, but you can find some cool stuff because not as many people are going there to look for fluorescent minerals, and you might be able to get a pretty good deal because other people haven't seen it yet. However, if you're going to be in the hobby for a while, you'll realize that the same people keep coming up having the coolest rocks ever. So I did another crowdsourcing to the 28,400 members at the time that I sent this out to our Facebook group. And I said, who are the dealers out there and where do you buy your rocks from? Now, the first half of this set of slides is going to be involving the people that reached out as the dealers. And the second half is going to be people I know that are dealers that didn't necessarily advertise on the Facebook post. Starting off, Greenland, again, one of the coolest places to collect fluorescent minerals, and tugtupite, which is one of the most prized minerals in the fluorescent mineral catalog at the moment. My friend Salute Sorensen lives in Greenland, and he specializes in tugtupite as well. Martin Hendricks is another wonderful, reputable dealer out of the Netherlands, and he specializes in excellently priced worldwide fluorescent minerals. Again, Miner Shop, the people that are taking those trips to Greenland, they specialize in Greenland and around the world. They even have a cool shop where you can pick out one of each color, just like the rainbow I showed you at the beginning of this whole presentation. Also, if you like carved stuff, Trevor Tremblay creates fluorescent spheres, and those are pretty neat if you like the non mineral specimen style. Gary Moldavani has a business where he specializes in the New Jersey minerals under Just Keep a Rockin'. And Bart Pickard has a company selling Terlinga calcite, and that's some pretty cool stuff because Terlinga calcite shows different colors under various wavelengths, and it's also has a lot of afterglow or phosphorescence, which is really neat. So he's a good guy to know. Joey Rivera reached out, and he's also a good fluorescent mineral dealer from the Northeast. And John Kashimerick has 20 to 30 tons of UV minerals at a great deal at Cush Fine Minerals. Other stuff exclusively dealing on Facebook. If you like Canadian minerals, East Coast Fluorescence has a bunch of beautiful Canadian calcite and others. Joyous Minerals and John Rofrano too. Also, very good dealers out there, have a lot of cool stuff, and you can get some pretty good deals. Now on to the section of the people that I really like. My friend George Pullman, he is a world-class fluorescent mineral dealer, and he sends out an amazing email that comes in there to my box, and I have to immediately check it out because everybody else that he sends it out to in the world is looking at them too. So you go through and you pick out what you like out of his catalog, and you say, "I'd like to buy these, sir," and you hope that no one else has already requested them. So it's a bit of a high pressure situation when the email comes in there. But I love George Pullman, and he has a lot of fantastic minerals from all over the place. James Horst has an eBay store, and he has a historically large amount of fluorescent minerals as well, is a very reputable dealer, and is incredibly smart. He helps to identify some of the minerals from the western half of the United States often as well. Real nice guy. If you're looking for the cream of the crop in the Franklin minerals, Ralph Bernard's got them. He deals on Facebook, and he has some of the most exceptional pieces from that location that you could find. So if you ever want to find some specialties or rarities in the New Jersey area, Ralph's going to have them for you. Another place that's a real hotspot for fluorescent minerals is the Pakistan and Afghanistan area, and that is a notoriously difficult place to find reputable dealers. However, Shafakwala Alamyar is one of my favorite dealers from that area with Alamyar Fine Minerals, and I've purchased a lot of stuff from him over the years, about a couple $1,000s worth of minerals, and he has really wonderful stuff. So you can check him out there on Facebook, and I believe he also has a eBay store as well. Here's some more of the dealers. I didn't want to make this slide presentation go on forever, but they all deserve their own page. All of the rocks on this slide I've purchased from the people. Dale Hewen has a bunch of amazing rocks of all kinds. Most of these people you can find on Facebook or on the internet. Leonard Borg is in Sweden, and he has some beautiful minerals, including that bright pink one. Mike Doran goes out in the Texas wilderness and collects these selenites, septarians, and fossils, and look how cool they are. The two most right images of the minerals, the fluorescent selenite with the hourglass inside it and that blue septarian, both came from him. Phillips Max Presson is a dealer of all kinds of minerals, but recently has found fluorescent minerals and dove in hard. And Dino Zach is one of the people that has a lot of the New York minerals, which are kind of similar to the stuff from New Jersey, but have their own quirks and specialties. Now, I talked earlier about not maybe necessarily knowing exactly what's going on in a lot of these minerals as we start off. So all these websites are a great resource to be able to figure out what kind of minerals you have, even if you aren't particularly sure, or if you want to do research on fluorescent minerals in general and grow your expertise. The first one here, Mindat, should be no surprise to anybody that's a fan of minerals. In addition to having all of the wonderful data that they have normally on Mindat, it also contains sections for the fluorescent colors that they may exhibit under the various wavelengths, and also a location. So in that galena scenario that I talked about, finding in one of my local shops, I said, well, there's a yellow fluorescing mineral on here, and it's pretty neat. If you can take a look at where the galena came from on the tag and see if there are other areas or other minerals in that area, I suspect it was sphalerite. And so as long as the sphalerite is listed here at the same location as the galena, you can get closer to figuring out what it is on that rock you may not know. Similarly, if you just want to go in and do no prior research, but have a world of fun clicking around, getting lost in the rabbit hole of nature's rainbows, which is the Fluorescent Mineral Society's website, one of them actually, you can click on any of these cloud tag links and it will take you to both pictures and articles about these keywords. And so this is a great place to just click around and explore. It's super neat. The Franklin Ogdensburg Mineral Society is a great resource just due to the quantity of the minerals up there in Franklin, New Jersey. You can find a whole bunch of information and a whole lot of people that have that information contributing to this website. So if you're going to start your collection with something like those Franklin, New Jersey minerals, then this is a great place to learn about those. And last but not least, of course, Floramin, which is after you go down the rabbit hole of collecting and you want to find out everything you can possibly do, this is a database of just fluorescent minerals. So it has a lot of in-depth and also specific information for the fluorescent mineral hobby. If that wasn't enough to wet your whistle, you can always reach out to the Fluorescent Minerals Society on the social media groups. The Fluorescent Mineral Facebook page, like I said, Fluorescent Minerals Facebook page has over 28,000 members. And if you message anyone there, it's a great place to well, if you just put up a question in that Facebook group, it's a great place to crowdsource your idea. There's a lot of people and they're really interested in helping out and figuring stuff out for you. And if that's not specific or trustworthy enough for you, you can always contact the Fluorescent Mineral Society's Facebook page itself. And that is me. I'll reply to you if you send a question that way. Other tools that you may want to have in your arsenal if you're going to figure out what's going on with fluorescent minerals or any minerals in general is a loop, for example, so you can see the crystalline structure in there. A Geiger counter, because a lot of the minerals that you'll come across that glow bright green end up being radioactive from urinal salts from uranium. And fun fact on that one, once someone gifted me a large amount of glowing green rocks that they had in their possession. And when I got them home, I suspected something. I whipped out my Geiger counter and I found that they were incredibly radioactive. So having a Geiger counter around is not a bad plan. Also, two more, the Mohs hardness kit and a streak plate would be nothing special to a mineral collector, but they are excellent tools to be able to figure out some of the some of the characteristics that we can use to identify minerals. If that's too much for you and you'd rather just outsource it, here's several places where you can pay or reach out to have someone professionally identify your minerals. Some of them have a cost, but they can be quite accurate. Now, let's get into our next section, which is the lights. In UV lights, what we're doing is, of course, creating that power source that's going to excite the electrons in the minerals that are in our fluorescent rocks. Back in the day, the original parts of the hobby, the lights that they had were all plugged in and tube lights. We'll get into the difference between tubes and UV in a moment, but they were all plugged in. So as the hobby went along, it was cumbersome and they were quite expensive. On the left, you can see in the bottom a transilluminator. And a transilluminator is a medical device that, of course, plugs in and it kicks out a lot of medium wave UV. And I'm going to quote here. This is from the internet. A transilluminator is a medical device used to visualize DNA, RNA, or proteins that have been separated by electrophoresis on agarose or polycromolide gels. I'm pronouncing that wrong. These are not words in my hobby, but this is the medical use for it. What would end up happening is because of the fact that it holds all those bulbs, the hobbyists would take this and then modify it to take or to account for shortwave UV tubes. And there's some information on that we'll get into in a moment. But as the time progressed, technology improved, and you can see on the second image that now we have a handheld tube shortwave light with a battery pack. So now this was a great tool that you could take to wave out in the field and find some cool fluorescent minerals. That's a $400 light right there, or even more sometimes. On the third image, you can see an LED flashlight. That's 4 LEDs as the technology improved. So this reduced the the size of this whole technology even farther. Both of the middle images are the same, roughly the same cost, right? $400. But it's becoming smaller and smaller and more portable, which is reducing the barrier of entry to a lot of what's going on. The last image we have is describing essentially the cost reduction as time goes on. So that is a 1 LED shortwave UV light that's filtered that has only costs $100. So over time, we do expect to see in the future that these lights are going to come down more and more. And again, the effect of the fact that these are more cost effective and everybody can afford them and get them means that more and more people are jumping into the fluorescent mineral hobby. And these lights are the reason. So on the Facebook group that we had, when I joined in 2020, during the pandemic, there was 8,000 members, and now there's over 28,000 members, and that's a heck of a growth in 6 years. The reduction in the cost and the improvement in the technology in these lights are a lot of the reason. When we're talking about lights, there's two main types that we're going to talk about here, and that is tube versus LED. Sure, there's differences between the lifespan and maintenance and the efficiency and energy, but for the hobby, what we care about is the spectrum and performance. Tubes provide a broad spectrum, which can be useful for illuminating a wide range of minerals. What ends up happening there is that the tubes themselves create a broad spectrum as it says. So in a shortwave tube environment, for example, it might also create midwave and also long wave that it kicks out, and it doesn't filter all that out. However, LEDs offer a narrow, targeted spectrum, providing higher intensity, better uniformity, and less scattering of light. So that's a more narrow range. Does that really mean anything though? Well, sort of. In most of the cases, like these examples, on the left you can see an LED example of the rocks that are, the top one is from Patapa, which is in Australia. The bottom is Southern California. On the right side, you see the same rock illuminated under the tube light. And I'd say that the LEDs are a more cool light and the tube light is a little more warm because in both of these rocks, the calcite is being illuminated more by the medium wave that's kicked out by that tube shortwave lamp because calcite really likes medium wave. So it's a little warmer, a little cooler on the left with the LED. Is that a big deal? Most of the time not. However, if we're thinking about the lights that we're going to buy and the displays that we'll eventually be talking about, this piece of fantasy rock from Greenland has a lot of minerals in it. But on the left, you can see that the LED specific bands, the narrow bands, didn't illuminate the sodalite, which is orange. Sodalite requires medium wave or long wave to be activated into fluorescence. And the tube light on the right is actually providing just enough so that you can see that sodalite. So if you're going to get a light and you want the most spectrum for your buck, maybe you want to go with a tube light. If you want to have a very narrow band to see specifically, exclusively what is illuminated by shortwave, medium wave, long wave, or 275 or 340, whatever you like, you may want to go with LED. Another thing to consider about the lights when you're purchasing them is, especially when you're starting a hobby, is that some minerals, not all, but some of them, can look different under every wavelength. So either maybe you want to buy all three wavelengths or four or five, or maybe you just want to specialize in minerals that look the best under the lighting that you have. This is a piece of Challenger Cave calcite from Mexico. Pretty cool under all the wavelengths. Okay, now when we're talking about the lights themselves, you have a wide range of lights that you can purchase in a various amount of money, for a various amount of money, I suppose. On the very left, you can see that there's an unfiltered 395 UV flashlight. What filtering is the ability to filter out all of the non-UV component of the light created by the LEDs, or the tubes for that matter. So in the image on the far left, that is not filtered, which means the LED lights, while they are kicking out 395 nanometer UV, they also have a lot of purple light in there. The second example is another one of those cheaper lights. This is long wave. It only costs $20 and it is a 365 filtered flashlight. That's a pretty good value. Not super powerful, but really good value. The third image is a Firefly, which is a very powerful 365 flashlight that's also filtered. That one's only 70 bucks. Then we go up from there and start to talk about display lights. We have a linker and a purple haze. These are just examples from Ingenious Designs. However, there are a lot of manufacturers out there, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But the power just goes up and up. So The last one we have is a 104-watt light that's almost $1,400. So part of the aspect of the hobby is modifications and tinkering. And if you want to build your own lights because those seem too expensive for you, well, we got a Facebook group for that too. There is a dedicated Facebook group on our social media platforms that talk about modifying lights or making lights or any aspect of the light you want to talk about. And you can get on that group and chat about what's going on. You can see there's a modification of the trans illuminator there at the bottom. And on the right side, you can see somebody's modified it a UV flood lamp, taped their own filter on the outside, and created something neat. Also, the fluorescent mineral website, Nature's Rainbows, that's run by our social media chapter president, well, actually, Facebook chapter president, Mark Cole, has a lot of information on the same, converting your different wavelengths or different lights into UV. You can see on the right, I've actually used one of those examples, followed it to the T, and created my own shortwave transilluminator. Didn't get electrocuted or anything. Upped the ballast to accommodate for the new lights, reinstalled them in there, put in some new fittings, wired everything together. It was kind of exciting. So the transilluminators themselves, it cost me now about $300 for the transilluminator and about $70 in total other pieces. And I have a 120 watt UV source, which is cool. So if you are going to make your own lights, where are you going to get the stuff? Well, I asked the people that build them, and here are the reputable locations that you can get parts. You may not always know where you can get a shortwave LED tube, or a shortwave tube rather, or ballasts, but these are the places you won't get swindled. Okay, so that's enough. You don't want to make that. It's more advanced than you're willing to do as getting into the hobby. So where can I just buy one? Again, I reached out to the 28,000 people in our group and I said, "Where are you guys buying lights from nowadays?" And I compiled this link heavy slide of all of the designers of the lights and then also the most frequently mentioned lights that come up in the group. So if you have the PDF of this presentation, you can just go ahead and click on any of these. And if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to reach out to me to ask for that PDF and I will send it to your email address. And you too can click on all these to purchase what you want. Chapter 3, we're going to get into displays now. This is an example of a very organized display. Everything has a little number on it. It's got a legend at the bottom. It's a wonderful looking display. This isn't me, however. I am more of the junk shop version of the display setting, and I rely on my memory to know what each one of these are, so that when I die, eventually whoever takes over my collection is going to be mad as hell trying to figure out what exactly is going on with all these rocks, which are which, and how much are they worth. I do have a catalog, but it'll be a pain in the butt to have to link up each one of these. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at with explaining these two different display styles is that however you choose to display the minerals that you love is correct. There is no correct way to do it overall. It's whatever you like. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, and we mentioned this earlier about the fact that UV is not as powerful as ambient daylight, is placement. You may want to think about putting your display that you're going to create in a place where you can control all of the ambient light, like mine are in a basement. The UV lights are on in both of these images on the left and the right, but on the left, my room lights are on in my basement, and on the right, the daylight, the room lights are off. And so you may want to be able to control all the ambient light and consider a placement of your displays where you can do that. Another thing I want to re-mention is that keep in mind that minerals look different under various wavelengths. So you may want to think about which rocks you purchase based off of the display that you already have or what you intend to create, and also group them together in a way that makes them look the best. For example, this is a piece of spinel and calcite, phlogopite, and fluorapatite from Alumyar Fine Minerals. If I was to display this piece of this rock under long wave only, the only thing that's going to be illuminated is the spinel. If I display it under my medium wave display, the only thing that comes out is that calcite, which is blue-purple. And if I display it under my shortwave display, then the only thing it's going to show is the fluorapatite in orange and the phlogopite, which is yellow. So when you're building your displays and collecting more minerals, you may say, well, I have a long wave display. I've already got red covered from my spinel, so I may want to go after a different color in long wave to complete the display. For example, here is a china cabinet that I modified, which we'll talk about in a second as far as a cabinet, and my grouped displays. There are three areas in the china cabinet, and I chose to make a long, medium, and shortwave display. And these are the minerals that I grouped together to make the most pleasant display for myself in each one of those wavelengths. On the top, long wave, in the medium, or in the middle, medium wave, and on the bottom, shortwave. Okay, so let's just buy a display case, right? If you've got all the money in the world, considering that this case is like $4,000, and you wanted to get an amazing case with storage and everything, wouldn't it be great to be able to, oh wait, I'm just kidding. The guy that made this is actually retired. Yeah, so there aren't really a lot of just purchasable display cases. In fact, pretty much the only game in town is Miner Shop, which creates a small size box that can cycle through different lighting scenarios like long wave and then daylight so you can see them, or white light, or it has a motion sensor that only turns on when you're nearby. So this is a pretty cool box. And you can go out here onto the Miner Shop website and you can pick out stuff. You can even fill it with a rainbow of minerals. As I said before, they have the ability to pick out one of each color for whatever you want. It's a pretty cool box and I recommend it. I have one myself. I like it. But it's not big enough for all the minerals I have. So eventually, you may, in the hobby, need to get into building your own display. And if you want to do that, I have already done it once for you, and I've put together a slideshow that explains everything beginning to end, how to modify, for example, a $35 Amazon bookcase into a fluorescent mineral display. And as a matter of fact, on the slide about the placement in the basement or in, that I have where my display was in the basement with the lights on and the lights off, that's actually what we're looking at here. Those are the displays that I built. But it's got all the information, and there's a link right there. You can check them out. There's a whole slideshow. Here's that china cabinet I was talking about. And what I did here, I made a video. It's only 1.5 minutes long, but it goes through how I took the cabinet itself and I used three different lights and I hung them inside the china cabinet. Then I took pieces of cardboard and painted them black and put the cardboard in front of the lights to hide them. So it just looks like a really neat display. One of the things I need to point out though, when you're taking existing items and like modifying them to be UV cabinets or UV display cases, is that glass itself has some interesting properties. It will allow UVA to pass through, but blocks UVC shortwave and UVB medium wave. However, it does, most glass is created based off a technique called float glass, where the glass is created and cooled on liquid metal. And that means that one side will actually fluoresce. It's not a lot, but you hope that when you get a display that you're going to modify, that the glass side facing inward, where you're going to have your lights, is not the side that fluoresces. If that's a worry to you, or you're worried about UVA passing through, because children's corneas allow 20% of UVA to pass to the retina, whereas only adults allow 5%. But if you're wanting to be super safe and you need to make sure that all of the UV is blocked, there's a material called OP3, which is an acrylic that blocks all wavelengths of UV light. And so in that china cabinet I was talking about, my middle section is a long wave display, and I had to put a piece of OP3 over top of the glass in there so it prevented any of the UV from coming out. Again, on the top and the bottom, the UV, shortwave UV and medium wave were blocked by the glass, and I was lucky enough that the fluorescent side of the glass was facing outward. Well, if that wasn't enough ideas about displays and you want more, Nature's Rainbows, the FMS website, has a bunch more examples. And you can click on those links or go to the Nature's Rainbows website and check out 100 more ideas. But our last chapter, getting into photographing and sharing your treasures. Again, I would love for more people to be geographically located near me, but I only have a couple of fluorescent rock friends, fluoressophiles near me. So I have to share mine on the internet. And to do that, I have to take good photographs of them. So how can you take pictures of your fluorescent minerals? Some people like to use a cell phone. If you're going to use a cell phone, I would highly recommend that you buy yourself one of these cheap tripods, because even with a cell phone, it takes up to 3 seconds sometimes in the low light circumstances we need for fluorescent minerals for these exposures to be complete. and you don't want a bunch of camera shake making your images blurry, even on a phone. So if you're going to use a phone, I would at bare minimum suggest that you turn off all the automatic settings on the camera, do it manually, and then also use a tripod. However, as I'll show you here in the next slide, phones have a lot of inherent qualities that I don't particularly care for. Now, I am a professional photographer, so I might be biased, but I did a little comparison. Here are three minerals from, or rocks from Greenland, and how they look under the the SLR single lens reflex big boy camera on top and an iPhone 12 on the bottom. On the first left side, you can see that the albite that came out of Greenland there looks amazingly red under the iPhone 12, but in real life, it actually looks like the top image under the Canon 6D. And if you were to buy that on eBay and receive it, or any other place that you saw these pictures, you'd probably be pretty disappointed. In another interesting aspect, in the middle, you have some sodalite, which is orange under long wave. And what ended up happening was it looked like the host stone was glowing blue with the iPhone 12 image, but under the SLR camera on top, it actually isn't. Similarly, on the far right, we have the same rock that looks a lot brighter and a lot more sharp with the iPhone image than it does with a SLR camera on top. If you want to see more examples of that, you can click the link at the bottom of this slide for the Facebook group where I posted a lot of the different images. Because I favored the SLR camera, I chose to go ahead and recreate a very boring presentation I had on photographing fluorescent minerals with a 17-minute, slightly less boring video on how to photograph fluorescent minerals with an SLR camera. I chose in here to use my camera as a remote trigger as well, because if you push the button in the long shutter speeds, it can blur your images. If you don't have a phone connected to your camera, that's okay too. You can use any remote trigger or even one of the cable remote triggers that they used to use with the film cameras. But this goes through all the aspects and why you'd like to take different style photographs or why you would do certain things to achieve a better image with your stuff. It even goes into editing. I choose to keep all of my rocks in the exact same position, and then I also use the camera on a tripod so that I can create a mask that eliminates all of the distractions in the background and the dust. Because once you get into the hobby a little bit, you're going to find out that dust glows under various wavelengths, and it is everywhere. I also cover how to get the images to look just like they do in real life. That's all in the same How to Photograph Fluorescent Minerals link on my YouTube page. Now, where to share them? The easiest place, of course, and the quickest without leaving the comfort of your home are the social media pages. Don't even have to put pants on. I would recommend the Fluorescent Minerals group on Facebook because I spend a lot of time there like a nerd. And then also Reddit has a thriving fluorescent mineral community, also Instagram, and also TikTok. All you have to do is search for the keywords fluorescent minerals. And if you don't know what those are at the very beginning, feel free to choose some of those websites that we talked about at the beginning. Also, go to your local rock and mineral clubs and share them there. Or in the right side of this, I put in a display at the Behringer Crawford Museum, which is a local museum geared towards children here in northern Kentucky, near where I live, to try to introduce this whole stuff to the younger generation. So all of these are great places to share your fluorescent minerals. Don't limit it to there though. Check out all of these other websites and you can submit images to each one of them, which is pretty cool. And again, don't forget that it's a great resource to learn more and more about fluorescent minerals. And at the end, all of the places set up by the Fluorescent Mineral Society are there to help you get a better experience in this hobby. The Fluorescent Mineral Facebook group, which I keep talking about, I just can't stop saying enough the positivity about because there's so many people with a diverse background. There is also a mineral mart specifically for us on that Facebook group, so you can understand that there are trusted and reputable dealers selling there. And please reach out to me directly on the Fluorescent Minerals Society Facebook page. I will be able to answer all your questions and help guide you the right direction if you choose to reach out there. And that brings us to the end of this presentation on getting into fluorescent minerals. I hope you've had a pretty good time watching it. And if you have any additional questions, you know how to get in contact with me now. Have a wonderful day, my friends.